everyone, Tony Winston here. Following up on a couple of videos that I did that were pretty, good videos for me. They paid the bills for a month or two. It was about the diminished scale, the altered scale, and the Lydian Dominant scale. And I'm going to show you some of the similarities of these scales. It's just kind of another way to think about them. So if you're using these scales to improve your improvisation, you can't learn to improvise just, by learning these scales and trying to stick them in places. You've got to learn to improvise first, just using melodies out of your own head, the major scale, the blues scale, picking out melodies to songs by ear, is really the first step in learning to improvise. But for those of you that are looking for ways to improve your improvisation, these three scales are critical. So, useful. So we're going to take the song Green Dolphin Street, and we're going to focus on the 2-5-1s. And so first I'm going to start off just, doing C major, and then C minor. It'd be like Dorian, which is a major scale. It's like the B flat major scale. So, so far, I'm not using any complicated theory. I'm playing C major. And you could put passing tones. Then we get to D. I'm going to use Lydian Dominant. We'll talk about it later. And then the Lydian for those two chords. And then we get to our first 2-5-1. And we got D minor, G7, and the melody goes right there. I'm on G7, and I started on G, and then I went a half step to what would be the flat 9 of the chord and the sharp 9 of the chord. And so that's how the melody of the song goes. So, if you're improvising, you can certainly use that idea. And let's see what scales that might suggest. All right, so all I did was use those two black notes. All right, so what scale starts like that? There are two that I know of, that I can think of offhand. One is the diminished scale, starts like that. Also, the altered scale starts with the same 5 notes. All right, so diminished finishes up with those 4 notes. And the altered scale uses different notes. Oh, well, one different note. That instead of both of those. So, the diminished scale has got 8 notes, so there's one extra note in there compared to most scales. So that's altered, and this is diminished. So, if you're messing around in this area, you don't have to think about which scale it is. You can think about the flat 9, the sharp 9, the third, and the tritone. Or you could call it the blue note, because it's part of the blues scale. So, all right, I used those, so I was in diminished. That was altered. Let me see if I can make a better line than that. And you could start the altered or diminished scale a little ahead of time, even on the D. It won't sound like it exactly fits, but, that's okay. It can rub a little bit. All right, so that was diminished. Let me see if I can get a better one here. Yeah, so there, I did use an altered voicing as well, so. Lots of ways to resolve that. Now let's take a look at Lydian Dominant. Lydian Dominant starts with the major scale. It's got the sharp 4 in there, and then it ends just like the diminished scale. So this is like the diminished scale. Lydian Dominant starts this way. Diminished starts this way, but ends with the same notes like that. So here we go. know, was I using diminished? Well, up here I was, but down here, you know, it's Lydian Dominant. And so if I combine this part of the altered scale and this part of the Lydian Dominant scale, I get the diminished scale. So they're very, very closely related, and you can weave in and out of all of them. Maybe just be aware of all the notes you can use. I don't think the C was in any of them. And the F sharp wasn't in any, so all those notes are kind of available to make a melody out of. And not only that, the F sharp works as a passing tone, and you know, the C is obviously not a terrible note either, since it's in the G major scale. So anyway, I just thought that was a kind of an interesting way to look at the two scales, or the three scales, and how they kind of relate to each other. On the next 2/5, all right, I'm thinking E flat, because you know, if you're on the 2 chord of a 2-5-1, you know, you use the scale from the 1, the E flat scale, and it gives you Dorian mode. And it's just a minor scale, basically. All right, and now on B flat, did you notice I'm using the same diminished scale here? Because there's only 3 diminished scales. There's 12 Lydian dominants and 12 altereds, but there's only 3 diminished scales because of the symmetry involved. So that same scale will work for G7, E7, D flat 7, and B flat 7. So it's the same scale. Now, could I use the altered scale the same way? No, that's kind of the wrong scale. I would have to, you know, go to B flat and play my flat 9, my sharp 9, my 3rd, and then finish out with whole steps like that. So I'm gonna do a better one. All right, and what about Lydian Dominant there? Well, I've got this. See, that's part of the Lydian Dominant. And you recognize it as being part of the diminished scale, too. The difference is I come up this way instead of that way, which is the diminished scale. So. The best lines still come from the blues, in my opinion. See, the blues, yeah, even here. See, you can make that, see, that gets the note for the D, that gets it for the D flat. Maybe use the more major sounding blues scale, this one, all right? One other scale that you know, I tend not to use as much as my idol, Art Tatum. And don't laugh, I know I play nothing like Art Tatum, but he's the only guy I've been listening to lately for the past week or so. And I've listened to Art Tatum when I go to sleep, when I wake up in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning. And now when I listen to any other piano player, they sound like an amateur. So anyway, he uses the chromatic scale a lot too. And you know, in the diminished scale, there's all these little chromatic parts in there. I mean, if you get going on that diminished scale, you know, just finishing it out with some chromaticism or something like that works good. What I don't like to hear is somebody who improvises with all chromatic stuff. You know, something like that. That doesn't interest me very much, and I do hear that from time to time from like local piano players. And there are some good ones here. I'm in a big city, Atlanta. But anyway, hopefully, this helps give you kind of another way of looking at these three very important scales: the diminished, the altered, and the Lydian dominant, and the blues scale. Okay, thanks very much. I want to thank my recent Patreon subscribers: Ted, Carl, the Side Doc, Louis, Augusto, Ira, and George. Thanks a lot for contributing my channel. I really appreciate it, and be back again with you soon. What do I've got coming up here? I'm going to do something. Oh, yeah. I'm going to teach people how to improvise using the blues. Very important.